Hello and welcome to Off the Fence, a podcast where we deconstruct difficult decision making to try to figure out what keeps us stuck and, more importantly, how do we get unstuck. I'm your host, Karen Covey, a former divorce lawyer, mediator, and arbitrator turned coach, author, and entrepreneur. With me today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Maci Chance. Maci's a realtor in the Denver, Colorado metro area who is not only skilled at helping anyone with their real estate transactions, but her own story and professional training has put her on a path to specialize in providing support and guidance for women going through a divorce who need to sell their marital home and find a home to start their next chapter. Her strengths lie in her ability to transform a process typically filled with fear, uncertainty, and monumental challenge to one full of courage, ease, and abundant opportunity. Maci, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks, Karen. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm thrilled to have you here, and I'd like to start, if you don't mind, with your own story. I mean, there's a lot of realtors in the world, but you do
hmm
something very specific. You work with women and everybody really who's buying and selling a home, but
hmm
your niche is working with women who are going through a divorce. Why?
Yep. Yeah.
Why? As Simon Sinek
Yeah.
says, we're going to start with why.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. So I got divorced about 10 years ago. It was shocking information to me at the time. And the very first thing I asked, which is what most people ask is, where am I going to live? Because I didn't know if I didn't have any idea. Could I stay in my house? Did I want to stay in my house? I wasn't sure. So the very first person that I called was my realtor. And we quickly came to which is what a lot of people do, because it's like, you know, where am I going to live? So I reached out to my realtor, and she came and saw our house, and she asked me, like, do you want to stay in this house? And I immediately knew I did not want to, which is, for me, that was an easy decision. For a lot of women, it's not. But in my particular case, I was like, it's too big, it's too expensive. I don't want to take care of this type of house. Plus, I didn't love the memories that were in it, the energy that was in it, the colors, everything about it. I was ready to move. And so my now ex-husband and I made the decision to sell the house. I moved in with my parents for a little while because I didn't know where we were going to go. And then this is actually kind of a cool little story. When we were negotiating our divorce, I had we had gone back and forth, and my ex-husband was kind of digging his heels in on some things, and we finally got to a resolution. And at my daughter's softball game, he handed me our all of his signed documents for me to take to the courthouse. I have my 9-year-old daughter in the back of the car. We're driving back to my parents' house where we were living, and I see an open house sign. And I was like, hey, Maria, do you mind if we go stop by this house? She's like, sure, 9-year-old little, sure, let's go look. We looked, we walked in, and I was like, this is it. This is the house that I want. So it was this weird opening that happened right when, everything was finalized. So I ended up going under contract on that house within the next couple of days. And then, moved into that house. But it was a very challenging situation, because I was like, how am I going to do this? I asked my financial advisor, should I do this? We had a mediator, but I didn't really have great information. And anyway, everything all worked out. We moved into that house. I did lots of updates to it, and then through my career journey, I started working for a gentleman who owned a real estate company. So to wrap it up pretty quickly, I really learned how to understand the value of real estate and the financial stability it gave me by being in, a 30-year fixed mortgage. My payment wasn't changing, the emotional stability that it gave for me and my kids as well. And so an opportunity came up for me to start in, or to go into real estate brokerage, meaning helping people buy and sell. And I immediately knew that that's what I wanted to do. And I immediately knew that I wanted to help people who were in my situation years before that, and help guide them through that process. That was a really long way of saying my why is to be who I needed at the time. I didn't know what I didn't know. I had a wonderful realtor who didn't have a lot of information about divorce. um, I I want to be a resource for people when they need to find, a divorce attorney, a divorce mediator, a divorce coach. You people call their realtor when they need something, and especially in divorce, they call their realtor. So that's my why around all of this.
Wow. And there
I
was
know.
so much in there. I don't even know where to start. The place I'd like to start is a lot of women, especially women who still have kids at home, are
Mhm.
not going to come to that immediate realization that you came to. They're going to,
Yeah.
most women, I think, for better or for worse, they equate stability for the kids with I have to keep the house. And
Yes.
sometimes that's totally the right decision. Sometimes it's not.
Yep.
What tips would you give someone who's in that situation, who's trying to figure it out? Can I afford to keep the house? Should I keep the house? Does this make sense? Because I don't think people think about the things that you instinctively thought about, like, I don't love the colors. This is too much house. This has
Yep.
got so many memories. Like, what would you tell women to think about, and how do they analyze this question?
Yeah, and that's such a great question. A lot of the calls that I get, I have a lot of therapists that refer their clients to me because they're usually the ones finding out that they're getting divorced, and the women are completely overwhelmed. And so they call me because what I tell the people that call me and people that become my clients, we're going to arm you with information and data so that we can make really good informed decisions, not emotional decisions, because there's just so much emotion running through everything. And when you're making such a major financial decision, you really want to make sure you have really good data as to what makes sense. It might make sense for you to stay in the home, but
Mhm.
it might not. And so then when you start to gather all this information, so if they're calling me, I'm immediately connecting them with a divorce lending professional. There are lenders out there with their certified divorce lending professional designation. That it's an amazing organization that really gives very good information to these lenders about how to guide people through making this decision. They have a whole program that they run people through. And so I partner with them because I know when I send my clients to them, they're getting really good advice about what to do. And so really to answer your question specifically, it's really about what makes sense financially, because if you're strapped and stressed out by money because you chose to stay in the home, assuming you even can because of the market currently, which we can talk about, but you're not going to be good for your kids if you're so stressed out about staying in the home, like putting a stake in the ground and going, I'm going to stay in this home no matter what, because I think it's what's best for my kids. Well, what your kids need is a mom that's grounded and working through her stuff and able to be present with her kids versus so worried about how do I make this payment? How am I going to do the upkeep? How am I going to, all this stuff by myself? Because it's a lot to take on by yourself.
It is a lot to take on by yourself. And if you could just elaborate on some of the things that people that need to think about when making that decision, because I think a lot of women say, "Oh, well, I can make this mortgage payment, so
Hmm.
I should be fine. I should be able to keep the house."
Sure.
But there's more to it than just the mortgage. What else do they need to think about?
Right. So, I mean, logistically speaking, you're going to want to do an inspection on your home before you say, yes, I'll take it, because there may be underlying issues that you don't know about that could be very costly. You could need a new roof. You could need a new furnace. You could need a new water heater. I mean, those are thousands and thousands of dollars worth of things that need to be done. And when you're in negotiations with your ex, those are things that you should have an awareness of. So, first and foremost, the maintenance of the home is very expensive. And so to make sure that you're set up to be able to handle that, it's not just about the mortgage payment. It's about, I mean, all of the maintenance that has to happen on the home is a big part of that. And then you talk about the emotional labor of the house, because it's all the things that have to be done around the house, which we can handle, but just being aware that you are going to be the only person doing it. I tell this story. When I bought my house, I had to, I mean, it was all on me. I had to figure out, I had this, sad to say, I had never mowed the lawn before because my ex-husband loved to do it. And so I had to figure out how to mow my own lawn.
Yeah.
We had a tree in the front yard, in my front yard, that had died. So luckily I was able to, my stepdad helped me anyways. So then I was left with, okay, I got to put sod out. I got to do all this stuff. Well, sod is heavy. You got to go to the store and get it. I bought gloves to go do all this work. And I think it was just kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back. I opened up the gloves that I bought, and they had been mispackaged. And so there were two left-handed gloves. And I'm not kidding you, I dropped and cried. I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like, it's just
Oh,
a stupid thing to have to do, but it was just like every little thing I had been doing on my own. And I got over it and it was fine, but it's just a funny story about like how I started crying over two left-handed gloves.
yeah, no, but I totally get it because it is a lot of work. And what I hope that people out there listening hear is that, I mean, what you said was brilliant. Get a home inspection before you get a divorce and before you start negotiating. Because the other thing I can tell people as a mediator, as a lawyer, as somebody who's negotiated hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of divorces and other kinds of settlements in my life, um, if you know that what's wrong beforehand, you could negotiate with your soon to be ex and say, look, we need a new roof. That's $20,000.
Mhm.
Either you give me, there's some credit for that, or we sell the house and we'll both
Right.
take the hit from it, right?
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So definitely, getting all that logistical stuff kind of cleared away is super, super important. And then you run into where we're at in our market currently, which is people have a lot of equity built up in their home because of the increase in property values over the last 4 years.
So how does that factor in?
Right. So, the conversations that I'm having with people really are starting with, what do you want? And then let's see what's possible. Because if, I'm dealing with a divorcing couple right now, they have $800,000 in equity in their home. I mean, that's a lot. And, the wife really was wanting to stay in the home, and she looked six ways to Sunday to try to figure out how she could do it. But at the end of the day, she wasn't able to come up with the $400,000 to pay out her ex. And so ultimately the decision was to sell the house. But those things are what are driving decisions.
Yeah.
And so that, I mean, which I'm sure you're fully aware of as you're seeing, in your mediations.
Right. I think a lot of people right now they're caught in the more it's not even so much the real estate end of it, it's the mortgage end of it because they've
Hmm.
got really nice mortgages with really low interest rates that they
Right.
can't get today. So
Yep.
if somebody's going to, in the past it was easier, not that any of
Hmm.
this is easy, but it was easier because you could take money out of the equity, refinance into a whole new loan, and you
Hmm.
did okay. That's not possible anymore. I
Mm-mm.
mean, it may
No.
be possible, but your interest rate is going to go up dramatically,
Correct.
right?
Yeah.
So how do people, what do they do when they're looking at having to refinance to get the money out and then getting stuck with a much higher interest rate?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, in this particular case, it was, she just ended up having to sell because it wasn't going to be feasible. Now, there are options potentially, and this is not my zone of genius. I would be referring this to my certified divorce lending partners, but assumptions are possible in most cases, depending on the lender in a divorce situation. And so you can work with somebody to help walk you through that. Now, the challenge with that is if you're in a 2 or 3% mortgage, more than likely you have quite a bit of equity. So an assumption is just taking over the mortgage as it is. You can't pull any money out of that particular assumption. So you still would need to come up with that extra cash to pay out your partner or your ex-partner. But again, it just comes back to talking to people that can really look at your situation and say, here's what it would look like if, X, Y, and Z. And
Right.
that's really, really the most important thing.
Yeah, and I think for people, and this is why I also usually counsel my coaching clients to speak with a financial advisor. You mentioned that you went to your financial advisor before you
Mhm.
made the decision of, can I afford to buy a new house?
Yep,
Because even if they're keeping the house and they can assume the mortgage, and let's say there is something else, typically a retirement account. It's like one spouse is going to get the retirement account, one's going to get the house. Well, that's great. A retirement account has restrictions on what you can take out, but at least it's got some liquidity to it.
yep,
Your
yep.
house, you can't eat your house, right? You can't
Mm-mm.
buy groceries with your house.
Right, right.
So, how people can make that decision because you don't want to be house poor.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, it's so important. I mean, I can't say this enough about really making logical decisions versus emotional decisions. And that's so hard. It's so hard in this situation.
I know. Well, what do you do? Let's change the scenario a little bit. So you've got a couple and they've come to the conclusion that they just need to sell the house, right?
Yep.
It is what makes sense for them.
Yep.
Right now, I know we're still, I don't know how it is by you, but we're still kind of in a seller's market, right? But the question is, even if you're in a seller's market, you want to make sure that you get the most dollars you can for your house. How can a
Hmm.
couple or, a person, anybody do that so that they get the most value and the most dollars in their pocket at the end of the day?
Right. And so this is the conversation I have with all of my sellers. The market has shifted a little bit, but it's a really good thing because it's shifted to a little bit, depending on where you are. It's very, very, very location specific, but a little bit more of a balanced market. I wouldn't say it's necessarily a buyer's market, somewhat of a seller's market still. There just isn't enough inventory
Hmm.
in general. So there still is, somewhat of a seller's market. But I tell all of my clients, the way you're going to maximize your net proceeds of your house is by getting your house ready to sell. And by getting your house ready to sell, I mean you are depersonalizing, you're decluttering, and this is going to be a little woo woo, but you're also releasing. And I'm a very logical person, but I also believe in energy, and all these homes have energy, and especially in a divorce situation it's not always great energy. And so it really is about releasing the house in whatever way that means to you. If you're a logical person, you're like, okay, I'm done, this is what makes sense, walk away. If you're a more of emotional person, it is really about saying goodbye to the house. I wrote a whole article for Divorce Girls Smiling about how you can actually do that. Um, because it's emotional and it's difficult to release it, but buyers do pick up on some of that energy. But more importantly, buyers, if they can walk into a home and see themselves living in the home, meaning, they're not walking in and seeing a bunch of clutter, they're not walking in and seeing all of your family photos, they're walking in and seeing somewhat of a clean slate. I do believe that staged homes sell faster than empty homes. And for more money, because again it's that visualization. Even an empty room looks small until you put furniture in it. I had a client the other day going, I don't think my king bed will fit in here. Not only did it fit, but it had 4 feet on each side, but you just, so you can't, it's easier to visualize it when there's furniture in the room anyway. So those are the logistical things about getting your home ready to sell and to try to sell it for the most money.
Right. So when people are doing this, I mean, some of my clients have been married for a long time, right?
Mhm.
So do you have any suggestions, any tips on how they can get in and do that decluttering? Because it's a nice, simple word. Say, oh, just declutter your house.
Yeah,
For some people, that's really a big challenge. How
for
should
sure.
they start doing it? Do they get a storage unit, start offloading to there? Start how do you what do they do?
Well, I'll just share my experience. I mean, what I did was I went through most of my stuff and got rid of what I felt like I could get rid of. And now that I look back, when I first moved, I did a little bit. And then I moved again and I did a little bit more. And because you're just not quite ready to let go of everything. And
Yeah.
so, you know what? If you need to get a storage unit because you're worried that you don't want to get rid of this and you're not ready and it costs you $100 a month and you can afford that for a storage unit, then do it. Like, don't put pressure on yourself around it. But if it really does, hold joy or whatever, spark joy, whatever the Marie Kondo method is, let it go. I mean, it is an opportunity for everybody to get a fresh start. So letting go of the things that don't serve you and that are kind of weighing you down, do it. I mean, that's the DIY method. There's also people that will help you do this, which is can be really, really beneficial, especially if you're in a super, challenged situation or a time sensitive situation.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, this is what just happened on a listing that I have right now. There was a time crunch to get things done. And so, we did as much as we could. There's still stuff in the house that hasn't been cleared out. It's in the storage unit or in the crawl space rather, and it's in the garage. But we got the house itself cleared out. Um, and so really, you start with what do we need to do to get the house ready to sell that people will see? So, the closets, the kitchen, that kind of stuff. Then we'll move to the areas that people can't see, the garage, if you have a crawl space or an attic or things like that, because all of that can get done eventually.
Yeah, that's really, really good advice. What about things like, I don't know, I've just always heard when you're going to sell your house, you have to paint everything.
So that all is a budget conversation, depending on how much money you have to help to get your house ready to sell.
Hmm.
And that's also one of the things that I tell the divorce attorneys I work with, like, please, like, be as detailed as possible in the separation agreement about the disposition of the home. How much money are they going to budget towards sale preparation? When does it need to be on, when does it need to go active on the market? Talking about price reductions, like, the more that we can get clarity around, me, the realtor, can have clarity around what's in place, the less decisions that have to be made between the two parties.
Yeah, and I
um,
love what you just said about make a budget for home
mhm.
preparation, for
Yep,
repairs, for whatever it is,
yep,
because what I've seen in in the cases that I've worked in, lawyers have a tendency to just say, okay, we'll split the repairs 50-50. We'll split the house prep 50-50, but there's no talking or discussion about what's the total budget, what's the total amount you want to spend. And you almost always have one person who is in a better financial position than the other. So one
yep,
person's like, yeah, let's do everything, and the other person is saying, no, I can't afford that, and then it causes
exactly.
fights. And it by articulating a budget on the front end, I think
Mhm.
that should go a long way towards saving a lot of fights on the back end.
100%. I mean, anytime I'm talking to, like, for any attorneys that are listening, mediators, coaches, all of that, like, the more detailed that you can be, the easier it's going to be for your client to make it through this. And as a side note, much easier for the realtor too.
Also
um,
important.
Yes, yeah. I mean, and really gets them to the best possible result, which is getting them the highest net proceeds, which is, that's always the focus. But to answer your question, it really depends on the budget, because you definitely want to do as much as you can up front when you're selling a house, so that, again, buyers walk in going, oh wow, I can just move in. If they're walking in and going, God, I gotta pay. People think paint is really expensive, and I'm not saying it's cheap, but it's definitely not a reason to walk away from a home, depending on your budget, obviously. But people have this perception that painting something is really expensive, it's going to take a lot of time. And so you want to remove as many of the objections that buyers might have on the front end. So if there's, if the home needs to be painted, that's always something that I recommend if the budget allows for that.
Yeah, that makes sense. That reminds me of one time when I was in the market for a house. I walked into this one place. It was like I've heard that you should paint first, right? This was the classic example of why that was true. The woman in there was an artist, and she liked island art, really colorful, that kind of thing. She painted everything. Mason,
Okay.
I mean, everything. The floors, the hardwood floors were painted with
Mm,
island art. The walls, the ceilings, the furniture, everything had this. And you walked in and you just didn't know where to look. And it
yeah,
was like it was so much, it was impossible to even see in your head what would this house look like if it was just painted white.
exactly.
And I can understand why she wouldn't want to paint over all of what she perceived to be her beautiful artwork, but
Sure.
don't know a lot of other people that would have left it that way.
Yeah, definitely not. I mean, it's a prime example of why taking away your personal preferences, making things as neutral as possible is super important when you're getting ready to sell a home. People are funny, buyers are funny. And, right now, especially when we do have a little bit more inventory on the market, they'll just go to the next house. And so, doing unless and pricing obviously is important. Now, if I have clients that are like, we can't afford to do anything, then we'll price it appropriately because we want to price it at a place where it's going to sell quickly. Because sitting on the market ends up costing more money over time as well. So getting clear on, can they do these updates? Is this even possible? Can we bring a handyman in or a handy person in for a day to fix up some of the things that have not been fixed over the years, because we all have that in our homes.
Yeah,
But we don't think about it until we have to sell. So, that's the conversation that we're having when we're getting ready to list what's feasible. And here's what I recommend that we do, starting with the top priorities. And then if we can't get to those bottom priorities, then we'll price it differently.
right. Well, what do you do though in a situation where the problem isn't necessarily budgetary, but it is that emotional issue? Either you've got somebody who, like the artist, doesn't want to paint over it, or like a spouse who really doesn't want to leave. They're sort of leaving under protest because they know they have no choice. They know financially they should, and I'm using air quotes here,
Hmm.
but they really don't want to. How can you help people deal with that emotional, the emotional aspect of the selling of the home?
So it depends on the client, but what do try to do is I do try to share my own story. And part of why I love what I do is I feel like I can be a light for people who are going through a really dark time. And it's very hard to see what life looks like on the other side, of whatever challenge you're going through. But I am an example of that. Now I didn't have to reluctantly give up my home because I knew that's what I wanted, but my life is so much richer and better now. I'm in an amazing relationship with my husband. Like I have, I just got remarried 2 years ago. Like there's so much goodness on the other side, and so I just try to share my own story, and some people are receptive to that, and some people really want to stay dug in, and that's okay. I mean, not everybody wants to see, the light at the end of the tunnel. They're still very mired in their challenges, but for the people that are like, okay, yes, I see that, and I know that letting go of this home is what's going to help free me to move on to something better that I don't even know what that is. And that's what I do, is I try to share that with them.
And that is so beautiful. And but that's the message. I mean, if people take nothing else from our conversation, to hear that sometimes it takes letting go of what you have to get to that better thing and the
Yes.
better life. But letting go is scary because in the moment you don't know if you're going to get that better thing, and
Yeah.
it's just really it's hard for people.
Yeah, it definitely is. I mean, I've said to people before, like, it's okay, we can live in victimhood, but you can only pitch a tent there. You cannot build your house in there. It's temporary. You got to move on. You got to move to the next thing. And, I get it. Like, genuinely, people are going through very big challenges and have been genuinely victimized. And, you have an opportunity to make a choice about what you want your life to look like. And going through divorce feels very overwhelming, and there's a gray cloud kind of over you, but it doesn't last forever. And there is so much hope about what happens next.
I oh my god, I love that. That is so but because it's true. I mean, I tell my clients, you want your divorce to be a blip in the radar screen of your life. You don't
Yeah,
want it to be the defining moment that colors everything from that point forward. It's just
exactly.
no one wants to live there. And what you're doing, the work that you're doing, especially helping people realize that sometimes giving up the house helps you move to that next chapter faster
Exactly. Exactly. 100%.
and better. Macy, this has been such an amazing conversation. I could just go on and on and on, but um, thank you for your time. So, and to be respectful of that, I'm going to bring a wrap around this. But if people want to talk to you, if they're inspired by your story or they want to work with you, where's the best place people can find you?
So my website is macichance.com, MACICHANCE.com. I'm on Instagram as Maci Chance Realtor. I'm on Facebook as Maci Chance Realtor, and I'm on LinkedIn as Maci Chance.
Thank you so much again for sharing your time and your expertise, and most importantly, your story with everybody here. I really appreciate it.
Thanks
And
so much for having me.
you're welcome. And for those of you who are listening, or for those of you who are watching, if you enjoyed today's episode, if you'd love to hear more episodes like this, more stories like this, please do me a big favor. Like the podcast, like the episode, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and I look forward to seeing you all again next time.